welcome back to another video. It's your boy EJ. I'm back with another video, man. I'm sorry I ain't been on this channel uploading. I said I was gonna upload every day, and I lied. I've been working on my other channel. We hit 100,000 subscribers on the other channel, so you will see a plaque on the back of the wall very soon. As you can see, I got my logos and all that on this wall. When I'm on my other channel, I kind of turn the screen, and then we focus. You know, have this be my background, but we're gonna start doing the background just like this from now on, man. For the meantime, I'm working on something very spectacular. I am bringing we're making a huge move where we have a way better setup for the stream, man. Way better setup for the stream, better lighting, better camera. So I got a camera, y'all. I got this Canon G7X, and I'm gonna start using this for the stream. I gotta set it all up, get everything all set up. I'm gonna start using this for my webcam. Right now I'm using like it's not cheap, but it's 1080p or something, I don't know. It's basic webcam. It ain't the one that come on the MacBook, but it is basic. So we're gonna watch this video, man. We're gonna react to it. I hope y'all enjoy it. If you can't hear me, if it's something that you think I should do better, as far as lighting, as far as the sound, let me know in the comment section. I am going to upgrade everything. Like, this is all beginner stuff. I'm gonna get a way better mic. You know what I'm saying? Cause I got a very, very, very nice voice. You know what I'm saying? It's natural. So I just need to, I just need y'all to be able to, hear it. So I'm gonna upgrade the mic. I'm gonna do a lot of stuff, man. So let's check this video out. We're gonna watch it together, and we're gonna do a little reaction, man. I need a new chair too. This chair makes a lot of noise. It's over with. I need to grease the bones, you know. Untold facts about slavery. What don't we know? I didn't watch this before.
The instrumental use of the history of slavery today also underlies the claim that slavery grew out of racism. For most of its long history, which includes most of the history of the human race, slavery was largely not the enslavement of racially different people, for the simple reason that only in recent centuries has either the technology or the wealth existed to go to another continent to get slaves and transport them en masse across an ocean. People were enslaved because they were vulnerable, not because of how they looked. The peoples of the Balkans were enslaved by fellow Europeans, as well as by the peoples of the Middle East, for at least 6 centuries before the first African was brought to the Western Hemisphere. Before the modern era, by and large, Europeans enslaved other Europeans, Asians enslaved other Asians, Africans enslaved other Africans, and the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere enslaved other indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. Slavery was not based on race, much less on theories about race.
Right, I knew that.
Only relatively late in history did enslavement across racial lines occur on such a scale as to promote an ideology of racism that outlasted the institution of slavery itself. Wherever a separate people were enslaved, they were disdained or despised, whether they were different by country, religion, caste, race, or tribe. In East Africa, the Maasai were feared slave raiders, and other African tribes, either alone or in conjunction with Arabs, enslaved their more vulnerable neighbors. As late as 1891, it was reported that Manyuema slavers had demoralized surrounding tribes, destroying crops, and famine reigned everywhere. Even in the early 20th century, Abyssinians were still raiding other Africans and carrying off slaves. It was 1922 before the British had gained sufficient control in Tanganyika to stamp out slavery there. Arabs were the leading slave raiders in East Africa, ranging over an area larger than all of Europe. The total number of slaves exported from East Africa during the 19th century has been estimated to be at least 2 million. The form in which this...
I knew this already, because I'm already like real hip to history, but like they said, they don't talk about this in school. They never mention this type of stuff in school. They don't mention shit. They only show like white people as a superior race or something like that, but white people used to be slaves too. if you was ever a slave, you were slaves by superior groups of people. Now superior race is just, you know, numbers. It's a number game. Strategic game, you know?
The story of slavery has reached most people today has been along the lines of the best-selling book and widely watched television miniseries Roots by Alex Haley. Challenged on the historical accuracy of Roots, Haley said, "I tried to give my people a myth to live by. This instrumental use of history, or purported history, is open to the same objections as other instrumental myth-making."
Myth? Hold on. Okay, hold on.
Despite the impression created by Roots, during the era of the massive slave trade from West Africa, a white man was more likely to catch malaria in Africa than to catch slaves himself. The average life expectancy of a white man in the interior of sub-Saharan Africa at that time was less than 1 year. By and large, men from Europe or the Western Hemisphere came to the coasts of Africa, bought their slaves, and left as soon as possible. Even so, the death rates among the white crews of the ships carrying slaves to the Western Hemisphere were as high as the death rates among the slaves themselves. It was only
What up?
Can't see you.
What's going on?
It's my connection, huh?
Uh-huh. Let me call you right back. My mama calling.
I'm about to call. All right.
It works every time.
much later, after quinine and other medical measures enabled Europeans to survive where there were tropical diseases, was it possible for them to invade Africa in force and establish empires there. But by then, the Atlantic slave trade had already been ended. During the era of that trade, Africa was largely ruled by Africans, who established the conditions under which slave sales took place. The crew of a slave ship
I be telling people this, bro. No little ass white man came over there and hunted down niggas. One nigga could kill 5 to 6 white men with their bare hands. Like if a white man, 3, 4 white men try to fight one African, he probably would kill all 3 of them with his bare hands, naturally. Just naturally, they way stronger. They way more in shape. They didn't eat. They never overate over there. You know, it was way stronger. No, it was niggas. They got this weaker niggas and sold the weaker niggas to the weaker white man.
Was in no position to defy African rulers and their armies by going out across the land and capturing people willy-nilly. The stronger African peoples captured and enslaved the weaker peoples. The same pattern found over the centuries in Europe, Asia, the Western Hemisphere, and Polynesia.
Everywhere.
In Nyasaland, the Ngoni and Yao swaggered over and terrorized other tribes. In Uganda, the Baganda made life miserable for their neighbors. And the Nyoro and Hima of Anko enslaved Toro women and children. The Tutsi dominated the Hutu in Rwanda, the Maasai lorded it over the Kikuyu and Kamba, and the latter, in turn, held the Indorobo in a kind of serfdom. It was precisely the fact that Europeans, except for the Portuguese, seldom participated in the raids that captured and enslaved Africans that enabled most people in Europe and the Americas to remain oblivious to the traumatic experience that this was, with some Africans committing suicide to avoid capture and wives being whipped as they tried to cling to their husbands or children. Historian David Breon Davis pointed out that Europeans had little contact with the actual process of enslavement, and that as late as 1721, the Royal African Company asked its agents to investigate the modes of enslavement in the interior. Europeans typically saw only the end results, enslaved people being offered for sale on the coast. It was much the same story in the Ottoman Empire, where those who bought slaves had no idea what these slaves had been through before. The unique position of the Western world in the history, and especially the destruction of slavery, need not imply that there was unanimity within the West on this institution. In addition to whites who defended the enslavement of Africans on racial grounds, or who opposed general emancipation on social grounds, there were many whites, and even blacks, who defended slavery as a matter of self-interest as slave owners. Although most black owners of slaves in the United States were only nominal owners of members of their own families, there were thousands of other blacks in the antebellum South who were commercial slave owners, just like their white counterparts. An estimated 1/3 of the free persons of color in New Orleans were slave owners, and thousands of these slave owners volunteered to fight for the Confederacy during the Civil War. Black slave owners were even more common in the Caribbean. In short, there were many defenders of slavery in the West, even in the 19th century. And outside the West, slavery was too widely accepted to require defense. No other nation ended slavery in the same way as the United States did, and few ended it after so short a struggle, as history is measured. How and why did slavery end in most of the world? There were two major processes. Over the centuries, as more and more territories around the world consolidated into nation-states with their own armies and navies, raiding those territories to capture and enslave the people who lived within them became more hazardous in itself, and also risked military retaliation against the countries from which the raiders came. Thus, more and more peoples became off-limits to slave raiders over time. Put differently, the areas which remained subject to slave raiding over the centuries were primarily those where the people lived in smaller or weaker societies. Such societies continued to exist where it was difficult, for geographic or other reasons, to consolidate large areas under one government. This was true of the Balkans, the backwaters of Asia, and much of sub-Saharan Africa. By the early modern era, sub-Saharan Africa, with its numerous and severe geographic handicaps, was one of the last remaining areas from which vast numbers of people could be enslaved.
Don't you wish you could travel?
All right, y'all. So listen, black people here. It's very important, bro. Stop playing victim, man. The white man ain't the enemy. White man ain't never been the enemy. It was always the other black man. It was always the nickel. Okay? I know I ain't supposed to say this, but listen to what I'm saying, y'all. Black people, stop blaming white people. White people are not the enemy. The enemy is your neighbor. It was always your neighbor. White people was never our neighbor. They never been as strong as us. They always feared us. They know what we capable of. They just want to get their little community and get far away from us as possible. Yeah, they brought a lot of us over here, but it was already people here. It was already niggas here already. It was already niggas here. They didn't bring out everybody here. Now, they don't talk about that in school, and I feel like it should be talked about. But there was black slave owners here already. There was black men with property waiting on the coast for the niggas to arrive so they can buy them too. Don't ever think white people feel like they was more superior. They never did. That TV bullshit, internet shit, the false ass movies that you watched, and all that bullshit is all bullshit. Just because people black don't mean they your family. Just because they black does not mean they your brother and your sister. I'm very serious when I talk like this. Just because they black does not mean they are your family. Does not mean they your brother or they your sister. Just because they black does not mean they have your best interest. Black people are the ones that sold the other black people. Black people are the ones that sold the black people to the white people. It was always the niggas, man. And I'm not saying that we just different. No, white people killed other white people and sold other white people to other white people too. Asians did the same thing to Asians. Arabs did the same thing to Arabs. Mongolians killed their neighbors. This is just the history of people. We all tore up in our own way. But it's time to stop playing victim. And I'm not saying band together. I'm not saying go get with a group of black people and try to band together and create this society, community. No, I ain't saying that. That's the opposite of what I'm saying. I'm letting you know that your neighbor could also be your biggest enemy. Your neighbor could also be your biggest threat. No matter what color you is, get with the people that love you. Okay? Get with the people that care about you, no matter what color they is. And that's how you build your family. You can build a family with whites, Asians. It could be a whole different interracial organization group. Get with like-minded people. Just because people black don't mean they love you. Alright, y'all, that's it for this video. I know this is a little bit touchy and all that, but I just think it had to be said. And hopefully you understand and you take heed.